not enough new potential customers know about you and your company, which means that you need to get more qualified leads in the door. So the sheet is going to look like this. There's going to be 3 buckets to solve this constraint. First is how to advertise to get more of these leads, how to engage them, and then how to brand your company. So for the first bucket, advertise, the first metric is going to be traffic. So I'm going to tell you why it's important, how to measure it, and how to improve it. So it's important because you need to have a broad measure on how many people viewed your advertisement, right? It could be views, eyeballs, clicks, depending on the channel you're using. But if nobody sees it, nobody buys it. The way you measure it is going to depend on the acquisition channel you're going to use. So for example, on ads and content, very simple, you can look at how many views you got. Then email sent, for example, if you have an outbound team or if you're sending cold emails, if you're doing cold calls, for example, you can have the number of actions that were done. For example, how many emails were sent, how many dials were made. So the way to look at it is reach and frequency. So reach would be, for example, one potential person looked at one ad for 1 second, and frequency is that one of that type of customer looked at 17 ads, totaling a total of 15 minutes over a few months. So that's going to be 2 ways to measure it. And then how to improve it, you need to do more, very simple, of your acquisition channel. So if you're doing SEO, that means creating more blogs, more content. If you're running ads, that means doing more creatives and spending more on ad spend. If you're sending emails, that means sending more and better emails. That simple. Of course, I'm going to walk through how to do that in a second. For the second metric, cost per lead, why is it important? Because it bridges the gap between the traffic, so how many views you got, and the final sell, which is the CAC, which we looked at in the introduction video, the cost to acquire a customer, which is the most important advertisement metric. So it's the bridge between, okay, we got X amount of views, which is great to know, but that's not the end goal. And then we got a customer that we acquired for $1,000, right? That's the bridge between the two. How to measure it? That's going to be what's your ads budget, right? So from that, you're going to be able to know how many forms, how many email replies or appointments scheduled, whatever is your main metric that goes from a view to a qualified lead, right? A cost per lead. So your ad budget, if you spend $10,000 a month and you got 50 leads, you can do the math very quickly. The way you improve it is, again, to create more and better ads, to improve your offer, your lead magnet, remove friction. There's actually a very long list for this one. Of course, I'm going to cover it in just a second. Then the third metric is the most important of everything we're going to look at. Again, it's part of the 2 most important metrics of everything we looked at, which is the cost to acquire a customer and how much is the customer worth. Now, we're focused on decreasing the cost to acquire a customer. And again, it's the most defining economic fundamental metric for your capacity to grow. The way you measure it is your total marketing spend divided by your number of customers. When I say total, it's everything. It's not only ads, but it's your employees working on marketing, it's assistants or VAs that you have in the process. Every single dime that is put towards marketing or growth is part of it. Then the way you improve it is going to be, again, multiple levers that I'm going to dive into in a second. First is going to be, have you improved your offer? Can you improve your offer in different ways, different angles, your messaging, your positioning, your ad creatives, your ad angles, the audience you're targeting, the lead magnets you have, proof that you have behind the advertisement that you've got, the branding that you have, and your sales process. So it's the biggest of the metrics, which is why there's so many levers under it. So very simple. Now we're getting to levers. So we looked at what are the main 3 metrics, which is views or traffic, then cost per lead, and then third one is the cost to acquire a customer. So views, the bridge between the views and the cost to acquire a customer is the cost per lead. This is what we looked at. Now we're gonna dive into the levers. So the levers, in any training and e-learning company, there's only 3 ways to advertise and get more leads. It's either you reach out to them, which is outbound. Inbound, they reach out to you because you have some sort of content or you are somewhere where traffic is is getting into, and they're writing to you, they're searching for you. Or third, paid ads, which in a way we're putting our content in front of them. That's it. Whatever way you're thinking. Of course, referrals is something else because it's not predictable. It's not something that you can, predictably grow. So outbound, inbound, and paid ads. For your offer, which is one of the levers that you have, the way I like to define an offer is how you present your product. So your product itself, the curriculum you have, the education, that sticks there. It stays there, right? But the way you present it, that's the offer, and that's something that can be, it's very manual, right? It's flexible. You can stretch it in all sorts of ways, depending on your audience, on your targeting, on multiple elements. And I've talked with a lot of owners of training and e-learning companies, and they seem to think that their offer is there. It just doesn't move. There's no way to improve it. It's very false. The story of, again, many owners in the space, they have the best product by far, but the customers or the potential customers cannot make the difference between their product and a competitor, which is very bad. Again, when we're competing on getting a customer, and we want to acquire that customer for the lowest amount possible. If there's literally no way, or it's very difficult to find a way to distinguish fast what your product does to another, that's where you lose in the long term. And that's where you can't raise prices, you can't decrease your cost to acquire a customer, and many, many other things that happens after that. So I have 6 things that is very easy to improve the offer, again, for training and e-learning companies specifically. So the first one is the outcome. So what are you actually promising? What is the results that you're giving? Because if all your advertising is the course itself, so we have a course, or we have a program, or we are an education company on this subject, that's great. That's your inner product. But what is the end result that your potential customer is trying to achieve? So are you actually marketing it? Are you talking about it? And can you improve that result? So that's going to be, again, I'll talk about it a bit later, but let's say if you were to achieve something in X amount of time, for example, or getting X amount of results, how could you frame it in a way where they could potentially get more result, right? Or could you talk to an audience, a target, a demographic that with your data, you can clearly see that they're getting better results. And so you always want to take what's the average result of a successful person with the education that you're providing them, and can we market it, right? So on average, our students are getting X, Y, and Z, or on average, the companies that get our training, they receive X, Y, and Z results. That's a great way to market it. Second one is risk. So whenever an individual or a company is buying training, education, e-learning, there's some sort of risk. So it could be a risk of time. So for an individual, it's going to be, how much time am I going to lose if I'm not achieving the thing I want to achieve through this training? A company, it's kind of the same thing, but for their employee, which in a way is even more valuable because it's at scale. And the best way and the simplest way to pull that lever to decrease their risk is to have some type of guarantee. There's other ways to decrease their risk as well, but if you can either do a guarantee based on their work, so if they completed everything in your program curriculum, if they went through a checklist of things that your best customers, if they do that, they're going to be successful, right? And this applies to companies or individual. It's what's called a conditional guarantee. Very simple. The third one is ease. So the way I like to view it is, how can you remove friction? The definition is, how can you increase the ease for your customers to get the results? So think about it as they are lazy. People are lazy and they want to do the least amount of effort possible to get the most amount of results. And you just need to think very strategically about, what is my customer actually doing? What do they actually need to do step by step by step, even the tiniest of step that I could remove, right, from the process. And ultimately that makes your offer more desirable, right? Because if I was to get the same amount of result doing, 10 times the work, I don't want to do that. I would even pay more to to take less time to achieve the same result. So that's very specific to each company, but you just have to look at your product and the way you're advertising and trying to find a way that what could be one part of the process that either your company could do for them or that you could remove. It's just friction. We just want to remove the friction because at the end of the day, we want them to put the most amount of time into studying, looking at your curriculum, your training, your knowledge, incorporating it into what they're doing their day to day, and not the other little things that they need to do that most of the times happens because it's a natural part of things. The fourth one is going to be speed. So that's time to result. So the definition is how can you increase speed of the results gained from your customers. So if you were to achieve a result in 6 months, could there be a way that would still make the person successful, because we're not trying to make them go through a terrible trash ebook in 2 weeks or even a few hours. That's not the goal. Your product is your product, but is there a way? Can we give them more support? Could we make the curriculum in a different way? Could we give them a community access? Could we give them whatever it is? We try to find a way to get them to that result in slightly less time. So even if it goes from 6 to 5 months, it's an enormous win for a lot of people. Because, for example, if you're a training e-learning company that is career focused, that a month of job for them is worth your entire program in a lot of cases. $3,000 to $10,000, for example. And for companies, a month for big companies is absolutely gigantic. They thrive for speed and efficiency. Then there's going to be proof. So in the mind of your potential customer, they're thinking, what is my likelihood of getting that result, right? So the definition I like is how can you increase the belief and perceived likelihood that the prospect gets results? So think about it this way. When you say it, it's marketing. When your customer say it, it's proof. And for proof, you will never, I don't care how big your company is, you will never have enough proof. You need more proof in different variations, different formats, but most importantly, it needs to be new. So the newer the proof, the better. So here's my 4th step to get more proof and to make it better. So the first one is it's better to have the exact same very specific problem that a prospect has in their mind being solved in a testimonial, in a case study, than any problem. So you can think about it as, just so I can give you a quick picture. For example, a nurse that is a mom and doesn't have a lot of time to study, if you have a testimonial or case study of a nurse, so her same job, is also a mom that went through the process, that also didn't have time but found time because the curriculum and your product was so amazing, can you understand and see how much more believable it is for the nurse that thought she was a snowflake, which we all know she isn't, but if she has that example that is exactly her scenario, her likelihood, her belief in the possibility of her getting results is going to be way higher than it was just someone getting a result. So the second one is bigger results is always better than any or small results, right? So if you have any way to share numbers, actual specific data, it's much better. So achieving a high paying job, or a training company, saving X amount in a specific role, whatever it is, bigger results is always going to be better than any result. Then you want to be showing instead of telling. Can you actually show the person in their new job? A picture instead of just having it written. A written format, that doesn't mean a lot. So is there any way you can add pictures, just showing it? And that leads to a 4th point, different formats. So if you only have stuff in quotes, written, maybe just a picture of someone, can you actually do it in person? Can you do Zoom, where we see the other person talking? There's so many different formats. Shorts, it could be very long, an hour long with someone that dives into the pains and the specific details of their journey. And again, I've spoken with a lot of owners in the space, and they'll tell me, Elliot, people won't watch, a 30-minute to a 45-minute. And I always say to them, it's false, and after when we looked at the results, we both laughed because the people that are going to watch those, it's the people that are on the edge, right? They're just about to make the decision, and they just need a few, just a little push. And sometimes literally listening to someone with their exact problem, talking very specifically about what they need and the solution for 45 minutes, that's what they need to get to the next step. So it's not going to be content with hundreds of thousands of views, but you don't need that. You just need the right people to look at it. So that's regarding proof. Real fast, if you own a training, education, or e-learning company and you aren't growing as fast as you'd like, I'd like to give you a free gift. So I've put together this growth roadmap that is specifically for training, e-learning, and education companies, which is basically over 100 hours of myself digging into each phases of growth on how we helped our partners in this space get past their bottleneck and exactly the strategies that we implemented to, again, solve these bottleneck and constraints. So I've broken it down into 3 phases of growth. And I actually made a little kind of quiz where if you put your business information, you'll receive this exact roadmap personalized to where your company is struggling and your revenue level on exactly what to do to grow your company. And this is specifically on the marketing and sales side. This is not on operations, product, or legal. This is just on how to grow your current company. And so I'd like to give you this thing absolutely free. Just add your information and you'll receive your copy. I added some examples here of our company. You see a point where it's me and one of our partners, a training company, where we shake hands. So it shows that I met that person, that owner in person, and we filmed an entire case study going over the results. Then we have the same one in a different format. So it's the face of the owner Dylan in a written format. Then you can see to the right actual leads that we generated for them and the revenue generated for them. And then below you have other examples of, can we create, a card? Can we create, a quote? There's so many ways to do it, but you need to have a way to produce these types of high quality case studies and testimonials on a weekly and monthly basis. The last one is support, which is how can you help the person get better results just by holding their hand, right? So how can you just guide them by the hand, maybe getting them more accountability, maybe having calls with them? Can you remove parts of the process? Just think about how can you help them get results by giving them more support. And again, all of the 6 elements, it's not just about doing them, it's about actually marketing them, right? It's about advertising them so that people can make a better decision between choosing your product and someone else. Because in your situation, when you have better marketing and advertisement, the person, it's going to be so clear why it's for them and the little details that makes them, tick towards your product. And these are the 6 big elements. So I wanted to give a few examples of bad offers, which I see everywhere in the space, and good offers. So a really bad offer is I'll get 10% off of our training. There's no reason for the person to go ahead and do that. You're just going to be competing on price, not on the quality of your offer or the uniqueness of your offer. So here's an example of an actual offer that we've done to a healthcare medical company. The offer was just get your staff trained. Literally, that was it. And get 10% off our training. And we switched that to, we'll bring 200 new medical students to your school and facility every 6 months at no cost to you. So I'll explain just for a second. So most of the training that we're doing were within schools and colleges. And they actually had to pay to get into these colleges to, train people that were either nurses or in the medical fields. And so what we looked at when we reviewed the data is that the colleges, they were paying heavily to attract new medical students to their colleges, right? So not just medical students, but people that were in the field that were trying to get a higher level of education. And so the way we framed it is that the company was already paying to acquire and to, serve these medical students. So what we did is we found something that the audience, the colleges, the schools found valuable, which is getting new medical students in the door. And we looked at, on average, every 6 months, they were bringing to these colleges 200 medical students in their facility. So the only thing we changed is we try to say it in a very clear way. Second, we framed it as we're gonna bring it to you. So as we were pretty much advertisement to get these people in. And then all we need to change in the delivery process is just give them a card or pretty much show them to the college, and the college is gonna be happy. So first, that got us way more colleges because the goal was to get into more colleges. So there's of course the B2B side, which is schools and other companies, and then the B2C side. So and the second thing is that now the company, the training company, is not paying for to get into the colleges. So they're doing it for free. That's why it says at no cost to you. So you can get really creative with your offers. You just really need to think outside the box. Second one, as a really bad offer, is get subject certified. That's it. That's your entire offer. That's a bad offer. A way better one is pass your exam, get certified on your first try, or we pay for your retake. Of course, this is going to depend on the type of trade you have, but who doesn't want to get certain and be sure that they're going to be able to get certified and pass their exam? That's a way better value proposition. Then the last one, unmatched subject curriculum. I've honestly seen this so many times. So unmatched or the best, subject curriculum. First of all, 99% of people shopping, I'm talking about, B2C, so just normal people, not companies. Curriculum means almost nothing to them. And they wouldn't even know the difference in the quality of your product as we know it. Even if we can't be on the same page, like this product's much better than this one. If the person that is looking to buy your product, if they don't know that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So a better offer would be get hired in the first 6 months or in the next 6 months at your dream job. So a much better offer would be get hired in the next 6 months at your dream job. That's what the person actually want. They don't care about the curriculum. They don't care about how efficient your program is, and if you're using AI and chatbots, and if the internal roadmap is perfect, and if it follows psychological patterns to help the person learn. They don't care about that at all. They just want to get a job, and a great job for them, and they're stressed because they don't want it to be next year. They want it to be in the next 6 months. So again, I know for some companies it's going to be difficult to replicate those, but at least you can see and start to think and push about how you can make the offers much better. Then messaging. So the definition of messaging is the words you use to make the right person feel like your offer is for them. So I'll say it again. The words you use to make the right person feel like your offer is for them. So you have to understand that the best offer, which is very important, doesn't always win. It's the best understood one that does. So that's where messaging comes in. Where is the messaging applied? It's everywhere. It's on your website, your ads, your landing pages, the emails you send, the assets. It makes an enormous difference. It's really the clarity and how much a person says in their mind, wow, this is exactly for me. So solid foundations for messaging is going to be having a really in-depth research document. You might already have one. You want to dig into it and use it so your messaging in your marketing and advertisement is much better. Then do you have a list of desires, right? What are the pains of your prospects? And even if you have that, do you have that by demographic? Do you have that by the different target audiences that you have? Because if you look at your CRM and your past sales and clients, you're going to see that you have a wide you have a wide range of customers that are totally different one from the other, and you need to know them very well. Then do you have recordings of your sales calls, of your sales conversation? If it's done by text, email, Zoom, calls in person, do you actually have the words that is being said by each of your clients that ended up buying? Then all the insights of the sales conversation, and do you have case studies and proof? Because as you go through the testimonials and case studies process with someone, a client that got great results with your company, you're also extracting a lot of bullets for the marketing and sales process, because you can reuse the words and the difficulties and the pains and the doubts that they had, the fears. You reuse all of that into your marketing. Then there's the gap. So the gap is very simple. It's the tension that already exists in your prospect life. So it's really important that you don't create that tension 99% of the time. You meet it, right? So your job is to give it a language. So you name the thing, they haven't admitted to anyone. So the thing that makes them feel seen, it's what earns the click, right? So if they're stressed at their job and they need a new one, if they're not confident in their abilities, right? Whatever the angle is, there's a gap. And a gap, we all know it in sales. It's you are here and your end objective, your end goal is here. The bridge between them is the gap, right? And you want to make them feel the gap, right? And that's all of the mastery of copywriting and knowing how to use words, right? Which is why really understanding human psychology at a really root level is extremely important and will always be, because at the end of the day, that's who you're selling to. Then once you improve the offer, worked on the messaging, you are fixing the gap and really utilizing the copywriting in everything you're doing. Now, how can we incorporate all of that into ads, creatives, and angles? So that's the two types that I'm going to be talking about. So you have ads creatives, and then you have the actual angle, which is more of the copywriting side. And the ads, the definition is very simple. It's the media that you advertise. So whether it's a photo, a picture, whether it's text that you're sending, whether it's an email, that's an ad. So for the ads, the levers that you can pull, it's creating higher quality creatives. That could be, editing, that could be the format, that could be doing it in person. There's very many variable for higher quality, but we can both look at an ad and look at very quickly, is it high quality or not? Then simply creating more media. Do you have different formats, different angles, and a higher volume? Because you never know, the same ad with two different words can have a totally different response. Then target different awareness level. So an awareness level is from Gene Schwartz, which is an old copywriter that invented the 5 level of awareness. So think about someone that knows that they have a problem and they're at the highest level of awareness. They literally have their credit card in hand, right? They're ready to buy. They feel the tension. They just need to get the action rolling. Then you have the person that knows that there's a solution. They know that they have a problem, but they're not sure which one to pick. They're still very close to buying. Then you have someone that knows they have a problem, but they're not looking for solutions or not. They just know that they're fat or that they need to fix something in their life. Whatever it is, they're just aware of it. And then you have most people, that's more of the market in general, that literally do not even know that they have a problem. They're not aware of it. And you need to create different level of ads in terms of awareness, because most of the market are not even aware. Then you have, again, people that are aware of the problem. You need to push on that. People that are aware of the solution, you need to offer them the exact solution that is going to be the results for them. And then what I like to call the 3%, the very top, most training and e-learning companies, they are only marketing to the very top, people with their credit card in hands. So, and they're not even touching the 97%, which is horrible. It's a horrible way to do business, and that's a big reason why their company is not growing. They're leaving 97% of the market out there. And you need to use different formats. People consume media in different ways. Some people consume audio, some video, some text, some they really like PDFs. Whatever it is, you need to give them access in a different way, and that unlocks different parts of the market as well. Then different angles. So an angle is a type of pain. So if someone, for the weight example, feels like they can't fit their shirt anymore, that's an angle. If they don't like what they see in front of the mirror, that's another angle, right? So we're trying to find many ways to say the same problem and to help them find the same haha moment, just in different ways, different angles. Then testing completely new approaches. That's really getting into the testing zone, trying a different way of filming the ad, different way of looking at the problem, whatever it is, that's going to be in the testing phase. I added here a quick example of what's an ad angle. So this is literally
part of one of our docs that we have. So you can see that we have a desire. So that's an angle. So either it's a desire or it's a pain. So an angle with a desire, for example, and then we look at, is it a new angle or it's not a new one? And did it win? Is it a winner or is it a loser? Winner, loser, that just means we looked at the metric and it didn't, correlate with an ad that we could scale. So many example right here. Just wanted to show you that. Then for the ad creatives, I added a few example here, which we created hundreds of, and you can see that it's very different. These are all images. I couldn't show video right now, but all of these images, you have very simple one. You have ones that they give off a different vibe. Some that are literally in person. Some that highlight a very specific feature. These are very examples that we're publishing every single week, and you need to be able to have that flexibility of publishing very different ads. Then this is an example if you're more on the outbound side, which is the cold email or cold calls. This is an example of an email that is actually being done correctly. So now with different softwares and advanced technology, we can personalize a lot of the emails and the writing within the emails to really speak to each individual. I won't dive into it, but every single thing I mentioned applies. Writing better emails, sending more emails, implementing the human nature and the awareness levels within the emails, all of that still applies. Now, the other lever to pull is lead magnets. So the definition of a lead magnet is a free resource that attracts interested leads. The way to look at it is that a prospect that pays with their time and energy now is more likely to pay with their money later. And in the e-learning and training space, they're looking to get educated. So you have an education product. What you want to do is to educate them up front. I mean, it's very logical. Anyone that is going to be buying an education product is going to want to educate themselves first before making a buying decision. You just want to be the company to be educating them, to be giving them the resources for them to be making a decision. So there's 2 steps to create a lead magnet. So the first one is solve a narrow problem. So of course, before that, you need to get what is the list of problem. Remove your product just for a second. What is the list of problems that your ideal, target client has before they get your product, of course? What are all of these problems? Then pick one that is going to be either the earliest one or the one that can get the most value for your ideal client. And your goal is going to be to solve that very narrow problem for them. And through helping them with that problem, revealing another problem. So for example, it could be a diagnosis, it could be an audit, an assessment. There's a list of things, right? Any forms of PDFs, it solves a problem, but when it solves one, it always opens another problem. The second step is going to be to pick how you will deliver on it. So is it going to be a spreadsheet, a calculator, a mini course, a checklist, quiz, brochure, white paper, roadmap, report, niche data, whatever it is. And then you just want to create it in many different forms. So in audio form, text form, image form, video form, kind of like this entire roadmap. My goal is to help you at least first understand what is your bottleneck, how to solve it. And then the next step is very natural. Once you get the clarity, which is the biggest problem that a lot of the e-training and e-learning company owners that I've talked to, they just lack the clarity. They just need a direction to go into, right? They have 1,000 ways they could improve their marketing. They don't know where to invest, what to do, where to put their energy, where to push their team into. They end up not making a decision for years. They lose millions in revenue. And if this roadmap can just help you get to that next step or get more clarity, then either you'll do it on your own, which is great, and you'll have more goodwill with me, or you'll want to solve the problem actually now that you have clarity, and you'll want to work with us. That's a great example of a good lead magnet, in my opinion.